Hello friends, let's continue with the same topic now, transportation. And the next parameter we are going to learn now is about blood vessels. So when I say blood vessels, immediately three names should strike your mind, and those three names are arteries, veins and capillaries. Well, study of these blood vessels is called as angiology. So what are those blood vessels then? Let's talk in detail. Three main blood vessels: arteries, veins and capillaries, and they all are interlinked with each other. So let's learn first difference between these arteries and veins. So what is the difference now? The first thing is about thickness. So whenever we say arteries, they are always thick walled, and when you say veins, they are always thin walled. So arteries are always thick walled, veins are always thin walled. Second difference will be about type of blood carried by this. So we know about arteries always carry oxygenated blood except pulmonary arteries. So arteries always carry oxygenated blood and veins always carry deoxygenated blood. Exception is same, pulmonary veins. Now third difference will be direction where the blood is carried. So arteries, as we studied that in the heart diagram, always carry the blood away from heart. So always it carries blood away from heart. And when we talk about veins, will carry blood towards heart. Then comes another difference, which is about presence and absence of valves. I hope you remember the meaning of the word valves. So in case arteries, they don't have any valves. So valves are absent in arteries and valves are present in veins. Why so? So the reason is, in arteries blood flows with a pressure, so there is no chance of a backflow. But in case veins, blood flows with low pressure and there is a possibility that blood may show backflow, and therefore there are valves present in the veins and there are no valves present in arteries. Like that, another difference you can remember is this: branch of artery we call as arteriole, and a branch of vein will be called as veniole. Next difference is blood pressure. Just now I told you blood pressure is always high in arteries and low in veins. That way you also can remember one more important difference: lumen What is this? Lumen. Lumen is actually the cavity of that artery or cavity of that vein. When we compare them, we find that the cavity or a lumen of artery is narrow and the lumen of vein is wider. So lumen is narrow, lumen is wider. So likewise, there are still some more differences, but these are 7 differences I have given you. They are more than sufficient. Maximum 2 or 3 differences you need to remember, which will be asked for 3 marks or maybe for 1 mark question can be asked. Distinguish between arteries and veins. So here, if I draw diagrammatic representation for your understanding, not required for boards, it will be like this. A section of your artery and a section of your vein. What we can see here is there are 3 walls in both artery as well as vein. This is outer wall, similar in both artery as well as vein. If you say this is artery and this is vein, section of artery and a section of a vein. So this is outer wall common to both. Then there is another wall which is below this outer wall, thicker one in artery. This is wall number 2 and it is thin in case vein. So this is the reason. Now you can see the thickness of this artery and the thickness of this vein. So arteries are thick walled and veins are thin walled. Then comes the innermost layer, and that innermost layer is this. So these are the 3 layers which are present in both arteries as well as veins. But the middle layer is well developed in artery and it is not well developed in vein. And what is left is this cavity, which I called as a lumen. So now see the difference. Lumen of this artery is narrow and the lumen of this vein is wider or broad. So here are the differences between artery and vein. This diagram we can say TS of artery and TS of vein. TS stands for transverse section. So I hope you're comfortable with this difference. I'm clear with this concept. Now what is left is this, capillaries. So when it comes to capillaries, capillaries are the thin walled blood vessels which lacks this outer and middle layer which is present in artery as well as vein. So if we take the section of this vein, it would look very simple and that would be like this only. So it does not have outer layer, middle layer which is there in the artery, but it has only inner layer, and therefore we can call capillaries are the smallest blood vessels, very thin walled, and these are only the blood vessels which are responsible for exchange of materials. All the food materials, oxygen, waste, everything gets exchanged through this wall of the capillaries, and they are present between these arteries and veins. In fact, branches of these arteries and branches of these veins, which we call as arteriole and venuole. So that is what the difference between arteries and veins you must remember, along with the basic structure of these capillaries. Hope you're confident with this topic. Okay, So here is one diagrammatic representation to understand again better about arteries, veins and capillaries. Same diagram I have sent you there in a soft copy. Those notes which are provided to you, you can also check there. So see here, this is artery which is rich in oxygen. This is vein which is rich in carbon dioxide. So this artery now carries this oxygen, divides itself into this branch which is arteriole, which later on divide into capillaries. Now these capillaries transports this oxygen to the cells or the tissues, and then the carbon dioxide formed as a breakdown of that food, oxidation of that food, is now transferred back into these capillaries. From these capillaries it will enter into the venule. This venule will open into the larger branch which will be called as a veins. And these veins will go and open into that superior, inferior in vena cava or pre-caval and a post-caval, and that is the way how circulation of blood will occur. So understand the concept, try to understand the diagram. Well, this diagram is again not required for your boards. There is another diagram given to show the double circulation in your text. You can observe that diagram. Most probably it won't be asked there in the board examinations. Structure of the heart is more important, that could be asked for your examination. So I am sure now your concept about this blood vessels is very clear. And now we are going to talk about the last part of this human circulatory system. It's very important part now, about blood pressure. In your boards they will give you a paragraph, then they will ask some questions based on this. You will come to know that during your mock test or your prelims what kind of questions are asked on this blood pressure. So when we say blood pressure, it is always measured for arteries. So blood pressure is not only called as a blood pressure. We will call it as arterial blood pressure. Now which artery is used to measure this blood pressure usually is this artery situated here in the hind arm. Name is not much important for boards, but I am telling you the name of artery is this brachial artery, whose blood pressure is always measured or checked. Now definition of a blood pressure, when you say, it is nothing but the pressure exerted by blood on the walls of arteries during heartbeat. Once again, definition is pressure exerted by blood on walls of arteries during heartbeat. This is known as a blood pressure, arterial blood pressure, and the artery whose pressure is checked is known as a brachial artery. Now you have seen that device which is used to measure this blood pressure, the traditional device. Nowadays there are some digital devices also available, but when we talk about traditional device, it is known by one name. You must have heard that name, a very small simple name, which is this sphygmomanometer. Important name. The device which is used to measure the blood pressure is known as sphygmomanometer. And one more thing or a device is needed, indication of doctors. You have seen that usually hanging in their neck, called as stethoscope. So these are the two things which are needed to measure the blood pressure. Now ideal blood pressure is measured by making that patient or a person to lie on the bed. Then this sphygmomanometer has got one cuff, or there is one band which is wrapped around the arm, and then there is a pump which is used to pump the air So as that air is filled, a pressure is exerted on this artery, and this artery gets pressed, and the blood flow through this artery is stopped. And now what these doctors do, they use this stethoscope, they put that sound receiver of that stethoscope and try to hear the sounds which are produced by the blood flowing through the artery by releasing the air pressure. So when they release that air pressure, slowly they release that air pressure, some sounds are heard, and then they detect the blood pressure of adult man or that patient, whoever is. Now there are two main pressures which are measured by those doctors or those nurses, etc. That will be called as a systolic blood pressure. The first blood pressure is known as a systolic blood pressure, SBP in short. When we will call this blood pressure as a systolic blood pressure? So it is a pressure exerted by the blood on the walls of arteries during contraction of heart, or a systole of a heart we can call. So this pressure is usually more, and when we measure this pressure in healthy adult human being, this pressure is about 80 millimeter of mercury. Unit is important again, mmHg. 80 millimeter of mercury is the ideal systolic blood pressure in adult and healthy human being. Fine. Now comes second blood pressure. That would be called as diastolic blood pressure. Now how do you define this diastolic blood pressure? So it is nothing but the pressure exerted by blood on the walls of arteries during diastole. And diastole is nothing but relaxation of the heart, right? So this pressure is usually, make a small correction, this pressure is usually 120 millimeter of mercury, and this pressure is about 80 millimeter of mercury. So systolic blood pressure is 120 millimeter and diastolic blood pressure is 80 millimeter of mercury, and both these pressures are read together and written together. That is 120 by 80 mmHg. This is the way how the blood pressure is written or represented. So this is the blood pressure of adult healthy human being, 120 by 80. So 120 is systolic blood pressure, 80 is diastolic blood pressure, and difference between these two pressures we can call as pulse pressure. Pulse is different and pulse pressure is different. So this pulse pressure is the difference between systolic blood pressure and diastolic blood pressure, which can be calculated by the formula systolic blood pressure minus diastolic blood pressure. So if you put values, it will be 120 minus 80 equals to 40 mmHg. So this 40 millimeter of mercury is ideal pulse pressure in adult healthy man or adult healthy human being. Is that clear? So remember these things which are very important, and it may fluctuate, it may vary slightly. Plus or minus 10 millimeter of mercury can be seen, but that is not called as abnormal blood pressure. Plus or minus 10 is considered normal only. And I said this is for adults. For old people, this pressure may not be the same. For children, this pressure is not the same. So it is different. So these values are for adults. Now, any change or a fluctuation more than 10 millimeter in this pressure will be abnormal. And that would be high blood pressure or a low blood pressure. So you can use some terminologies for the same as hypertension and hypotension. What is the meaning? Hypertension will be rise in the normal blood pressure. Now both blood pressures will rise, systolic as well as diastolic. So rise in systolic blood pressure as well as diastolic blood pressure will be called as a hypertension or high blood pressure. Now that may be very high. Like in some people that blood pressure may be found 180 millimeter of mercury, 190 millimeter of mercury. If it is more than 200, there is a possibility blood vessels might get ruptured. So that's the reason why this high blood pressure or this hypertension is referred as a silent killer. High blood pressure is referred as a silent killer. So for example, here I am writing if it is a 150 by 90 or 100 also I can write mmHg. This is just for your example. 150 by 90 mmHg, this will be called as high blood pressure. I said it may be 180, 190 and so on. So there are various reasons why high blood pressure is caused. So some causes or some reasons for this high blood pressure could be obviously increase in weight or obesity, that is an invitation to this hypertension. It may be because of faulty methods of diet or eating habits. If people eat more and more fats or oil, that could lead to this high blood pressure. More cholesterol, stress. So such reasons are responsible for rise in this normal blood pressure or a hypertension. So there are some medicines, there are certain drugs which are available in the medical stores which are prescribed by the doctors to such patients, which are normally blood thinners, which make the blood thin so that it can easily flow through the blood vessels and it will not result into future heart attacks, which is known as myocardial infarction in a medical language. So this rise in blood pressure is an invitation to other disorders like heart attack, or there may be a chest pain which can also be called as angina pectoris in the medical language. I hope you understood the meaning of this hypertension, what are the causes of this hypertension and how we can avoid this, how we can prevent this hypertension or a high blood pressure. Now it's a time to learn low blood pressure. So this low blood pressure, or you call it as hypotension. What should be the meaning? Like rise in the systolic and diastolic blood pressure was hypertension. So here it will be fall in the systolic and diastolic blood pressure, then the normal pressure will be called as low blood pressure. Now it is also equally dangerous. Normally it is found in children, maybe found in the pregnant women, etc. If a person meets with an accident and there is blood loss, so volume of blood decreases and that results into low blood pressure or hypotension. So these are the causes why people suffer from this low blood pressure or hypotension. So for example, if I write here, instead of 120 by 80, it could be 90 by 50 mmHg. Even some people show this blood pressure up to like 10 millimeter also it might drop, 8 millimeter also it might drop, and that is also dangerous. And unfortunately there are no medicines or there are no drugs to rise the blood pressure. There are medicines or there are drugs to drop the blood pressure but not to rise the blood pressure, and therefore the cure for the same is proper diet, then no stress of course, enough rest, enough sleep. These are the ways how this blood pressure can be brought to normal, and obviously supplying blood, supplementary blood, additional blood can be used to increase this low blood pressure or a hypotension. So something interesting and important topic, which was what is blood pressure, what are the types of blood pressure, what are the disorders which are related with this blood pressure. I'm sure you have understood this. The concept is clear to you all. Go through the NCERT textbook, read the same. They have given diagrammatic representation also of this blood pressure, how to measure it, and there are some in-text questions based on the same topic. Soon I will be sharing assignment with you people. Already soft copy shared, and I'm sure you are reading that. So keep studying, stay home, stay safe. Good day.